In today's episode, we're talking all about leadership development events, otherwise known as LDEs, or public speaking events in the FFA programs. To help me with this topic is Jason Ferreira, a high school ag teacher from Central California, and we're going to get into his backstory here in just a little bit. But I thought this would be a timely topic because the day after this episode is posted is actually the state finals for the LDE competitions in the state of California. So all of the regional top four participants in all parts of California will be coming together to compete in their various public speaking teams: creed, impromptu, prepared, extemporaneous, and job interview. And we'll talk about what all those are here in a little bit. But I thought it'd be an interesting topic to go into. As you'll notice, it is a little bit dated because we recorded this a few months ago and I just didn't get it out until now. But I think that it's a good time for it. And if you enjoy it, make sure that you subscribe and follow the podcast, like it, and do all the different things. Make sure that you share it. And as we always say, don't just share it on social media. Share it in terms of conversation. Talk to your family, your friends, random people on the street, whoever will listen to you about what you learned about this episode, what you enjoyed about it, and what you want them to take away from it. There's also the Patreon. If you'd like to donate, it is by no means mandatory, but it is very much appreciated. And without further ado, I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and in today's episode, we're talking all about the value of FFA, LDEs, CDEs, and just the general experience of agricultural education. This is a big topic, so to help me talk about this today, we have a high school ag teacher from Hanford, Jason Ferreira. Mr. Ferreira, go ahead and introduce yourself to the crowd if you don't mind.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me here today, Brendan. As Brendan mentioned, I am a high school agriculture teacher. I've been teaching for 11 years and actually have been in ag education as a student when I was in high school myself. And now as an ag teacher, I can definitely speak to all sides of the equation in regards to ag education and FFA and involvement. So I'm excited to be here today to talk a little bit about that exciting topic.
Awesome. And as anyone who listens to this podcast knows, I'm pretty involved in the ag ed thing. I'm studying to be a high school ag teacher myself, and I coach. I helped coach a couple LDE teams in my day. Not to mention when I was in FFA, I competed on the extemporaneous public speaking team. I was a state semifinalist. Did some citrus judging. Obviously, I coached some showmanship for Tulare beef team, all that kind of stuff. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I think there's a lot of value to agriculture education as a whole, obviously, but also these leadership development teams that really help kids get a lot of these hands-on practical skills that are going to help them in the long run of their life and career. So I think that the best way to get started with this is obviously being a podcast that focuses more on the general public and people who don't quite have that ag background. They're probably not going to know what we're saying when we're talking about LDEs and CDEs and all these different events. So for the people who don't know, would you mind explaining what an LDE or a CDE is?
Yeah, absolutely. So within ag education, our students have an opportunity to compete in what we call LDE and CDEs, which is just an acronym for Leadership Development Event or Career Development Event. And the unique part of ag education is that we provide these opportunities for students to take what they've learned in the classroom and apply it to how it's going to be interpreted as an adult in their adult life, in their careers. And they can actually compete against other students and win awards for having developed those skills and knowledge within public speaking is our leadership development events. And then career development events, there is over 30 different career development events that students can get involved in that range all the way from animal sciences to plant sciences to agricultural mechanics to agricultural business. And it encompasses basically the entire industry of agriculture. So students will gain these skills through their classroom, through coaching, and then they'll take those skills and apply them in these competitions, determine who's the best, to take home those awards. But then really the biggest reward out of all of this that we always need to keep in mind is these lifelong skills that the students are going to carry with them into their adult lives and careers. And I coach a wide variety of LDEs and CDEs. And primarily, I spend a lot of time doing that because that's where I can focus my efforts on students that have a passion in a specific sector in agriculture, and we can learn and develop more of those skills that's then going to prepare them for those careers later on in life. So I'm excited to talk about a little bit of those today.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, I mean, the best way to get started that I could think of is just kind of, talking about some of the events themselves. So I know that you help coach Job Interview and Prepared and a couple other teams. Are there any that either I don't know about or that you're particularly passionate about that you kind of wanted to talk about and explain?
So LDEs, which is the public speaking competition aspect, there is 5 different LDE speaking individual competitions: creed speaking, impromptu speaking, extemporaneous speaking, prepared, and job interview. And those 5 individual speaking activities are my favorite in terms of coaching students to develop their ability to confidently stand in front of an audience and deliver a powerful message. It's a weapon that could literally change so many of the world's problems. And so me particularly, I coach the job interview and the prepared public speaking competition, which is typically your junior and senior level students in the ag education programs. And those are my favorite because students that are heading into the job force are wanting to have those skills ready and prepped and basically have their weapons in order for them to be able to successfully gain employment later on. And so those ones specifically, I spend a lot of time preparing students for, and I have a lot of fun preparing them for relevant competitions. And that's another thing, is it's relevant. Having a resume and a cover letter that stands out amongst hundreds of potential applicants is something that students need to have prepared for their future. And I get the opportunity to coach them through that and assist them with that. And then being able to just articulate a thought from their brain through their mouth into somebody else's brain is a rare skill nowadays in the high school classroom, especially with technology and cell phones and everything electronic. It's a skill. It's a rare skill nowadays to have. So I definitely enjoyed that. And career development event wise, I've coached a wide variety of career development events based upon student interests. But I've scaled back to not coaching as many of those because I do have a passion with agri-science research SAEs. And so I run like the wind with having students conduct scientific experiments and having those students then take that into the competition aspect of things because I'm a nerd. And what's cooler than being a nerd and experimenting and collecting data and analyzing the results? And so I have my students conduct those in my classroom, and that's part of my LDE and CDE responsibilities.
Nice. Yeah. And I mean, this is obviously a show that's very welcome to fellow nerds and especially those who are dipping their toes into the ag world, or more than just their toes, their entire body basically into the ag world and agri sciences. But no, I mean, that's really cool. I mean, I didn't do job interview in high school. I did extemporaneous, obviously, but I learned a lot of my skills in terms of career readiness and as general job preparation through those events. I learned a lot about what I know about job interviews, about resume building, about cover letter writing, all of that kind of stuff through friends of mine that did job interview, through Mrs. Williams. She was the advisor for job interview. So I got to learn a lot of those skills that helped me when I, got to college and started getting prepared for those kinds of events, being able to conduct myself properly in a job interview. And while it's helped me, it's helped friends of mine even more because I've been able to help them prepare for that kind of stuff and, look over their resumes and look over their cover letters and, do mock interviews with them and kind of get them ready for that stuff. So you hit the nail right on the head. It does more than just, help these kids with the competition. It helps them prepare for their lives, and not just in a way that they can have a better resume than somebody else, but also it gives them the confidence that they need to conduct a proper interview and not get stressed out or not, throw up red flags that aren't necessary, or, just kind of fall under the pressure of what interviews can do, because that kind of stuff can be really intimidating for people. I think the part of LDEs and CDs as well, but the part of the career and leadership development events that I really appreciate is the more of the presentation side of things. Being a fan of public speaking and being a fan of seeing speeches. Even if you're not up in front of somebody giving a speech, learning the communication skills that come with that kind of stuff is just so intangibly valuable. It's something that people can never understand until they've been through it. That you could tell somebody like, "Hey, it'd be really good if you learn how to give a speech," and they're like, I have no idea why I would ever want to give a speech in my life, but it's not because it helps you give a keynote speech in front of 1,000 people that's a valuable skill. It's because learning how to confidently portray information or not portray, what's the word I'm looking for, confidently present information to people in a calm and intelligent manner is something that gets you so far, no matter if it's one person or 1,000 people. I mean, just being able to talk about something that you're passionate about in an organized way, and more than just talk about it, but being able to organize your thoughts in a way that make them come across as really relevant and intelligent and proper. It does so much for yourself as a person, and kind of your self-esteem and your confidence, and it does so much for other people's perception of you as well. And so that's always like my biggest thing is whenever people are getting involved in FFA, or even fellow college students that I'm seeing at school that are struggling with confidence, I always tell them like, hey, have you ever considered learning how to speak, going to like a Toastmasters club, or like practicing writing speeches, or just stuff like that, because it sounds like a really weird form of therapy, but I promise you it has great results. I mean, that's what got me over my shyness and my anxiety when I was in high school.
Yeah, when you were talking about being able to present thoughts and arguments, I thought about today's society and how we are a very divided society. We're a very divided economy. I think that's putting it very lightly.
That's being generous, yes.
Yes, in a very generous manner. And one of the things that I find the most frustrating is we have an educated group of individuals regarding topics around agriculture and around the industry and how important it is that we preserve agriculture and the industry. But we don't necessarily always have a educated group that can present and articulate their thoughts in a way that is persuasive to others. Is to me the most important reason why I coach these CDEs and LDEs and prepare these students, because we could all be educated and we could all check that yes or no box on a voting ballot. But the real impact comes from being able to persuade the audience or whoever you're speaking to that your thoughts and your topic and your interest and your opinions are valuable for people to know and understand. And that's something that through ag education, we really hone in on teaching students about agriculture, because yes, that is important. Yes, we need food, we need fiber, we need shelter, we need all that. But we also need a group of people that can articulate that and persuade others that are not directly involved to see the value of it, so that we can get out of some of these situations that the divided economy puts us in.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. I know I've talked to students in the past that I've tried to convince to go into learning how to speak or learning how to articulate or learning how to debate or any of those forms of communication. And more often than not, I'll get the response of, okay, well, I'm going to go be a cattle rancher, so why do I need to learn how to speak? Or I'm going to go into mechanics, so why do I need to learn how to speak? Like they're going into fields that are not communication based, which every field's communication based. They just don't know it yet. But they're going into fields that are not based around talking to the public. So they don't realize why it's so important that they learn how to use those communication skills effectively. And like it's really hard to get them to see it. But one of the biggest things I really try to push on them is it's not that you need to be, the next Abraham Lincoln. You don't need to be up on a stage in front of people trying to convince them that what you're doing is good, but just being able to properly conduct yourself in a communication setting, just being able to understand properly why you think what you think and being able to tell that to somebody else. For one, that's huge just from a human perspective. Being able to be a good human to other humans is a good thing to have. But also, we're facing a society that is more detached from agriculture than it's ever been. At some point in your life, you're going to have to talk to somebody who doesn't come from that background, and you're going to have to explain to them what you do and why you do it. And it doesn't matter how into your job you are, you're going to need to have the skills to explain your job to somebody in a way that they're going to be able to understand it. And that is a really hard thing to do, especially for people who don't have that background. I mean, people who are great speakers even struggle with that kind of stuff because there's a language barrier there. We talk in a different way than people who don't come from an ag background talk. We use different terminology. We use a different way of phrasing a lot of that kind of stuff. So like if I'm talking about, how to slaughter an animal, I may use a different terminology with somebody who slaughters animals on a daily basis than I would with somebody who has never even seen an animal die before and they're not sure how to handle that kind of information. And it's not like a whole, we're trying to be sensitive, so we're trying to use, safe words or anything like that. It's a matter of having a conversation that people are going to understand and be able to appreciate without going into, this rage fueled debate that we tend to fall into if we don't have proper communication skills.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I was thinking about how I prepare my students, and I realized that we're speaking heavily on the presentation aspect of CDEs and LDEs, which is the judged part, so to say. That is the part where judgment is placed. But it also got me thinking about all the pre-work, all the prior work, all the planning, the preparation that goes into this is teaching our youth the value of research and conducting research to have credible resources that they're going to speak on behalf. Because let's be real, we see social media every day. People throw their opinions out like it's dirty water and it's just everywhere. But we teach students how to research effectively, how to gather what is important, and then regurgitate the information in a very prepared presentation, so to say. And that is a skill that is by far one of the most important that any student can take with them from an ag education program, is the value of understanding that your opinion, although matters, the research and the credible sources and the reliable, relevant information that you're going to gather pre-work prior to all the presentation, that takes time. And that also is a skill that we need to have. And so one of the things to capitalize on here is understanding these presentations are fun and cute and they look good and everybody presents themselves and whatnot, but it's a lot of tough work that goes behind the scenes into preparing these kinds of activities for students.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I'm like you, I'm a big science nerd, so research is a big thing for me. I mean, this is kind of the entire basis of this podcast, right? Is being able to have your facts right. That way people know that you're actually knowing what you're talking about, and not just talking, off the cuff. But teaching people how to do proper research is such a skill that is lost upon, especially like more modern generations, that it almost makes me uncomfortable to a degree to talk to people about a complex topic when they haven't done their research, because now, people are so quick to just say what they want to say without having anything to back it. And then it's like, okay, well, why am I even going to talk to you then? If you're not going to put in the time that I put in to know this topic, then you're wasting my time basically. And I when I used to coach extemp for Tulare, that was a big thing. Like research was my favorite part of it. Like obviously judging and like helping the kids get better at public speaking was great. And I learned to appreciate that more over time, especially like developing their body language to be more efficient and more effective and all that, because body language is kind of my big thing when it comes to communication. But the research of it for so long was like my strength. Like when I was competing in extemp, I had, Evan Garcia. He was actually a former co-host on this show. Him and I started, we were competing at the same time. We were on the same extemp team, and he was always the one that was really good at talking, and I was always the one that knew my stuff. And so, not to say that he didn't, but he was a lot better at the presentation than I was a lot better at the research. And so we had to kind of combine our skills. He taught me some things about how to properly present myself in front of the audience so I wouldn't get scared, and I taught him how certain information ties into other information that can make his presentation better. So it really taught me that a presentation has to be two parts. It can't just be you're a really smooth talker or you look really great on stage or you have great body language if you have nothing to say. And it also can't just be, you know, everything there is to know about this topic, but you can't get a word out because you're going to cripple under the anxiety. Like there has to be some kind of balance of confidence, but confidence in your research as well. You know, and I think that the reason that ag education is so valuable in this regard, as opposed to any other type of subject that you could use this for, is because, as we mentioned earlier, it's a science. You know, it's a very scientific based topic. So research on it is everywhere, and it's food. You know, so it's going to be one of the most heavily, if not the most heavily researched topics that we have to date. And there's a long history that follows it. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to use as material for speeches. So teaching students how to use these research skills, how to use these presentation skills, how to gain this confidence is really valuable if you teach them in a way that's practical that they can apply to their lives. So if you're using agriculture, everyone eats food, everyone wears clothes, everyone uses products on a daily basis that comes from agriculture. So if I'm trying to teach somebody how to give a speech, I'm going to teach them in a way that they're going to understand, and everyone's going to understand agriculture to some degree because we all relate to it. So it's like, it's a perfect standard to teach these kids practical elements of their life like this. So I saw you were writing something else down over there. Did I strike another nerve?
No, I was just thinking about the fact that with regards to getting students involved in CDEs and LDEs, from an ag teacher standpoint, one of the struggles is selling this. How do you sell this to a student? And I've come across many talented human beings in my career. Being a teacher for a decade, I've had, you know, quite a couple of hundreds of kids walk through my classroom that I feel like this is one of those topics where it's harder to sell students to step up to this plate than it is to sell Halo on Xbox 360 because they're more excited to go home and play with their games and do things that are more mindless, so to say. So if the listeners out there have any connections to anybody in either education or in ag, because those two things go very, very hand in hand together, have some conversations with whether it be a student and encourage them to get involved with this, whether it be an adult who's in industry, and try to get them to have a want to teach those students and to bring that relevancy and that knowledge into the classroom. Because as ag teachers, and I'll be the first to admit, and I tell this to everybody I ever present workshops to, I would trust industry more than I would ever trust an ag teacher because they live it every single day. And we don't. As a teacher, we don't live it every day. Trust us when we say we live with the students every single day and have those hardships, and we know how to deal with those. But in regards to industry, my biggest success in my career, I feel like, has been connecting students to industry, connecting them to people who are in it every day that can provide that relevant knowledge and those relevant resources and the things that are, in my opinion, more valuable than what a teacher can teach a student or tell a student to say, because I don't have all the research on certain topics. And I will never claim to have all the research, but you, the listeners, the viewers, the industry out there, get involved if you can and have those critical conversations that need to be had, because problems won't get solved if all the information just stays up here in your head. It has to flow, and it has to flow well. And that's what all of this fun stuff that we do in ag education is all about, getting the flow on.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, I've learned more recently, which I'm really happy to hear. There are quite a few people who are actively involved in the ag industry that are trying to get more vocal and trying to get more active in advocacy kind of stuff, which I think is great. Obviously, there's a time constraint on their ability to talk to a lot of people because they are busy. They have crops to grow, they have animals to feed, they have all that kind of stuff. But the ones who do have the time, they have seemingly been going out of their way to make those conversations more possible, which I think is a great step towards progress. It's just a matter of really encouraging these guys to get out of their comfort zone and talk to people that really need to hear it. I mean, it's great that we're talking to each other about, okay, what are the best solutions we have to fixing this issue or this issue. I think that's a fantastic way about going about it, but really emphasizing those conversations with, like you mentioned, the students, do they need to learn this kind of stuff, or people outside of the industry that are voting on this kind of stuff that need to know what they're voting on, or people who are trying to make, activist remarks about certain aspects of the industry when they don't have all the information, having those conversations. And that's not to say, you should go challenge every vegan that's out there and say, hey, you're wrong because of this. That's definitely not the approach that I would advise, but it's very different when you're, challenging somebody to a debate, and when you're saying, hey, I'm not sure that you properly looked into this because of this and this. Can we have a conversation about why you think this, and can we reach some kind of conclusion about this? That's a very, like, I don't want to say mature necessarily, but it's a very respectful way about going about that kind of conversation. If you can establish a ground of understanding and treat them as if they're an equal in terms of intelligence, but suggest that there's something that they're missing about the conversation, it tends to make it a little bit easier for them to understand what you're saying. And people in the industry are getting better about that, but we really, like you mentioned, we really need them because they're the experts at the end of the day. I mean, us in ag education and ag communications, like, we have a decent amount of research, and we have, conversations that we've had with industry professionals, but we don't have the daily stories, the practical experience, the hardships, the pain, everything that goes into having that conversation. We can basically just say, hey, well, I know a farmer who this happened to, which is great, but it's not as good as, hey, this happened to me. Like, I was that farmer. That hits so much harder for a lot of people. And I kind of wanted to go back to another thing you mentioned, which was getting students more interested in these types of activities. Getting them more, selling them on, speaking about agriculture, or just speaking in general, being able to go out of their way and get stronger as a speaker and as a presenter, and, how to effectively use their information and their knowledge for good, instead of just wasting it on something that they're not actually passionate about. I think that one of the big things that I like to pull on for my speeches is what I call the K factor. It comes from yours and my old advisor, Mr. Coolwine, someone who is very much a well-known name on this podcast. He always had an aspect of every speech that I wrote. He had to throw this in there just to knock me off my feet, basically. I would give a speech about some really good topic that I was really passionate about, and I would get through this speech and I would get so fired up, and it would sound great, and I would just nail it. At the very end, he would say, okay, that's pretty good. So what? And I'd just kind of sit there and think, well, what do you mean, so what? I just gave you this whole explanation about all this stuff. I have all these numbers. I have all this information. And he's like, so what? Why should I care? You gave all this information, and that's great, but, like, what's in it for me at the end of the day? Why would I even listen to your speech? What is in it that's going to attract my attention and make me go out and tell somebody else about this? And that, there's a reason I call it the K factor now. He used to always call it the so what factor, but with every speech that I gave, I had to start factoring in, okay, well, if I'm going to say this, they better care about it. So I better give them a reason to care about it. And so I think that when we're trying to convince people to advocate for agriculture, or when we're trying to convince industry people to go have those conversations with students or with the outside public, or if we're trying to convince students to go into public speaking or to advocate for agriculture, or to embrace some of those industries and try to learn how to use them to their advantage, we're really trying to focus on the so what factor. I think that's the biggest aspect of trying to sell these people on this, is saying, hey, what's in it for me? I want you to be a great speaker. Why? Well, because it'll do this, this, and this for you. You may not see it right now. This is probably one of the best experiences you're ever going to have in your life. Or I want you to go out and talk to people in grocery stores about where their food comes from. Why? Because if you don't, they're going to vote on things that are going to make it so you can't farm anymore. That's probably not going to be very good for you. So, like, just incorporating that so what factor is, I think, so huge in getting people to jump on board with this message of trying to spread ag ed as far as we can.
Recently, we just received an email from our local county fair, and I think this is a great example of everything that we've talked about so far. When Proposition 12 was passed by the California state legislature, it reduced the ability of swine farmers to do their jobs effectively because of the increase in size of pens and the way that the industry was going to be operating was going to drastically change. And yes, there was people that stepped up. Yes, there was people that went with their pitchforks and their fires, and they went as far as they could. But ultimately, California passed what is now going to cost California millions of dollars in regards to food production and producing the food supply. And another piece of that is that it's going to impact now the students that are exhibiting these livestock projects at local fairs, and how local fairs are going to have to follow that legislature, just as a producer would have to follow that legislature for livestock production. And students now are starting to realize, we are going to have to deal with all of that was passed. And sometimes I feel like it takes a huge eye-opening blow to the face, so to say, for some people to actually step up and rise up to that occasion. And now students are starting to realize we need to send letters to legislature. We need to make sure that our voice is heard, because now our livestock projects are going to be impacted by this proposition. And I feel like when we talk about selling things to students, if it doesn't necessarily directly impact the way that they do their life, it's harder for people to believe things. But now we're seeing it firsthand in ag education, how the lack of people stepping up to do what is right and advocate and talk and use those voices and share that research and those messages is now coming back full circle. Mm-hmm. And they're going to start to struggle with being able to comply with some of these laws. And that's going to negatively impact overall everybody who voted. And so this just goes to explain how everything we just previously talked about is so valid and important to making sure that we don't end up in these sort of situations like we're going to be experiencing with the passage of Proposition 12 and how it's going to start to negatively impact the world around us.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's really a solid example for a practical application of that, very thing that we just discussed. I mean, it kind of goes back to, what we were saying earlier about agriculture being the prime platform to teach kids how to speak off of, is because it's so practical and it's so applicable to their own lives. I mean, what's more applicable to, a high school student than something that's going to let them not do what they want to do? I mean, they're as we all know, teenagers are very much in the mindset of, I'm going to do what I want and you're not going to tell me no. So when you have state legislature that's telling them no, it gets a little sticky. You start to see the gears turn in their head where they're like, wait a second, that's not cool. Why would they do that? And then they start to realize the impact that some of this stuff has. And a lot of them tend to take it a lot more seriously. I mean, as you mentioned, they write letters, they look into ways around, this type of stuff. They start, talking to people in the industry, seeing what they're doing about this. Like, I remember my senior year of high school, California tried to pull funding from vocational education programs, and FFA was going to lose a big chunk of its funding from the state. And a lot of small chapters were going to go pretty much under if nothing was done about it. And I remember, like, most of the chapters in the state wrote letters to the California government and said, hey, you can't do that. Like, we're going to lose a lot of our stuff if you take away our money. Like, we have to have this funding, or else we're not going to be able to have our ag classes. We're not going to be able to show at fair. We're going to lose a bunch of money in scholarships. We're going to, you can't do that to us. And so it's like you mentioned, a big blow to the face is something that, is sometimes necessary, as hard as it is, for people to see just how bad things can get if you don't pay attention to them. And that all goes back to, the so what factor. It goes back to, like you mentioned, having research down pack, and not just for the sake of knowing what you want to know, but for the sake of understanding the like the intricate levels of complexity to go with a lot of these issues. I think a lot of the issues that we tend to talk about in the ag industry, especially the ones that we have students speak on at the LDE level, is they seem like simple issues on the surface, like, hey, are GMOs good or bad? Oh, that seems like a pretty simple one. But then you start to get into the meat and bones of the actual conversation. You realize just how deep some of this stuff goes and just how much there is to research on it. Like water seems like one of the most simple topics until you do research and you realize it's one of the hardest to speak on. And so like that was like the taboo topic when I was doing SIMP was you avoid water at all costs because it was terrifying to talk about. And trade was another big one. But it's one of those things that's like, you never appreciate just how much work and thinking and effort goes into the conversations that we have about these topics until you really get into it and you realize, man, like this is something that why is everyone ignoring this? Like this is so important and so critical to their daily lives and they're just completely blowing it over. And then now we're going to see bacon prices through the roof and everyone's going to be like, whoa, this is not what I signed up for. What's happening? And we're like, well, when you make pig cages bigger, the bacon price goes up. I hate to break it to you. But it's one of those things that, it all ties back, like you said, into the values that go into teaching students how to use these skills properly, teaching them how to speak, how to be coherent in their thoughts, how to organize their information and their research properly, and not just that. I mean, I remember, again, during my senior year right before graduation, Tulsa's mayor had the whole fiasco with, bad mouthing agriculture. I actually had him on the podcast to talk about it. And it was not my favorite episode. But I don't know if you heard about any of this, but yeah, Tulare had a big like drama with our mayor and I became somewhat of a local celebrity because I actually stood up during his town hall meeting and basically said like, hey, why'd you think it was a good idea to call a bunch of farmers in a farmer town idiots and murderers basically? And he didn't really have a proper response for me. And so I basically just kept going after him. I kept saying like, hey, look, you ignored this, like all these things were telling you this was a bad idea and you still did it. Like I have binders full of research that I could use to tell you how you were wrong in everything you said. That's not my job today. I just want to know why you thought that was a good idea. And I don't bring that example up to pat myself on the back. I bring it up because it showed the value that speaking teams gave me in terms of my confidence and in terms of my ability to have those conversations, because it wasn't something like I said, I had the research for it, but that wasn't something that research really helped me with. That was something that the confidence that came along and the passion that came along with doing those competitions really prepared me for the ability to stand up for an industry that I cared about and to have a conversation with somebody who was very clearly not willing to listen. And, those skills can be so critical for somebody, because we have students that are very passionate about a lot of topics, but they have no idea where to even start. But if they're given that chance to, to get up on a stage and say, I think this is important to talk about, and they start talking, they're usually surprised by what comes out of their mouth.
Is that Mayor Carlton?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Carlton Jones.
Carlton Jones. I remember. Yeah, I remember that situation. And I remember how many times students, literally, I've heard students, I don't come from an ag background. I don't come from an ag background. I hear it so often. And that's my favorite phrase to hear from a student, because that's when they start to realize I don't come from an ag background, but everything that I do in my life is backed from agriculture or backed by agriculture or backed through agriculture. And I've got students that the most successful students are those that didn't come from an agricultural background, but through teaching, through seeing, seeing is believing. So through teaching, through seeing, through having these exposures that they wouldn't have through any other type of formal educational program or learning experience, they now are going into agricultural fields and saying, I don't have an ag background, but I'm going to be the best advocate that you've ever seen. And that is literally where we see the pages turn in these chapters of our book, is taking those students from zeros to heroes in the agriculture industry. That another reason why I'm so passionate about this is because everybody that has an ag background love those kids to pieces, but they've already got what they need, so to say. They've already got the support, they've already got the investment. They have those, like you mentioned, the personal, this happened to me type conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But your average everyday student won't have that. And so we get to bring that to their experiences, their toolbox, their knowledge, and have them share that with the rest of the world. And so for for that reason alone, I wake up every day and enjoy what I get to do as a teacher because I have value and I have purpose within my profession. Not to say that a math teacher and a history teacher don't have value and purpose, but if we really just strip away all of the cherry and the whipped cream on top of the sundae, we just got to get back down to understanding that agriculture is the most important for us to all understand because it's what's literally our sustaining our life right now.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And I share that passion with you. I love getting to expose people to agriculture for the first time or helping them find their true understanding and appreciation of it. It's something, I mean, it's the main motivator for this podcast. I mean, I've had people come on that, most of the people that come on here are not from agricultural backgrounds. And they come on, like I ask them to be guests and they say, well, I don't really have much of an ag background. I don't have much knowledge in this. And I say, good, come on. And so they come on, we talk for a while and they realize it's not about what background you have. It's about how much you care about that topic. That's what's important. I mean, I grew up in Cowtown. There's dairies as far as the eye can see, and when I was doing cotton judging with Cool Line, we had a student on my team that was a freshman in high school, and I was a junior or senior at this time, and she had never touched a cow before in her entire life. Born and raised in Tulare, been around dairies her whole life. She'd always like seen them from a distance, but she's never been close up to a cow before. So I took her over to our school dairy because we have a dairy on campus, and all the dairy cows run over because they're super excited that people are actually paying attention to them, and they stick their head through the fence. And I had her put her hand on the cow, and she started crying, not because she was scared of the cow by any means, because she was so excited that she actually got to interact with an animal that she had always seen on TV and like from the road. And, like cows are almost one of those like magical creatures that people almost don't think are real until they actually get to like be next to them, just because how much we see them in like TV and it's like horses. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, horses and cowboys, they're like cool fantasy creatures, but they're not real. And then you ride one, you're like, oh, horses are kind of cool. And so I saw her just get so excited about touching this cow that I realize just how deep an appreciation can be for people who don't have that background. And it's almost like it's like you mentioned, people who it's almost more rare for people who do have that background to appreciate it than those who don't. And maybe it's the people who don't just have an appreciation for what they didn't get to grow up with, or I'm not quite sure what it is, but something about not having that experience from a young age makes you so much more willing to basically lay down your life for it. You're willing to put in the work, to put in the the effort to try to get that industry as protected and as promoted as possible. And I mean, that's been one of the biggest motivators for me to become an ag teacher, is not to encourage the kids who are from ag backgrounds. I'll be doing that as well, but to get the kids who either don't come from those backgrounds or do and aren't heavily enough evolved to really be active advocates about them, but those who haven't really discovered their passion yet. I love, like, my biggest thing of being a teacher is I love helping people find their passions, and just seeing like that light in their eyes, like just light up as soon as they figure out what they enjoy. Like for me, it was speaking. I was terrified as a kid. Like when I got to be 14, I was in Mr. Catano's class. I was absolutely like mortified if I had to even talk in front of one person. I couldn't talk to anybody. I was terrified of people. I was just a very shy, reserved person. And we were doing opening closing, and how that goes. Students weren't wanting to volunteer, and Catano said, hey, Brennan, why don't you come up here and give a speech for part of the secretary's part. And I was like, nope, not doing it. That's not my thing. And he was like, just stand up. I'm not gonna make you, I'm not gonna make you join the team or anything. Just stand up and do the part. So I did the part, and he was like, yeah, you're joining the team. I was like, no, that's not happening. And so like for the next 2 years, I fought him on being a speaker. And then I finally gave in my junior year and joined the STEM team. And I discovered that that was one of the greatest decisions I ever made in my life, because I enjoy speaking and I enjoy talking about topics that bring me a lot of excitement and curiosity, because I'm naturally a curious person. So I got to do research and talk about it, which was like huge for me. But helping other people find that spark, find that thing that lights their fire, is something that I have like set as like my life goal. I want to help as many people as possible find the thing that motivates them to go out, every day and do their thing. And for me, that is speaking, but it's also, that ironically enough, helping people find their passion is my passion. That's my goal in life. So, I think it's like you said, being able to convey that to students, to show them that it's okay to not have that yet, or that it's okay to not be from that background, or even that it's okay to maybe even not support agriculture initially, and then introduce them to it slowly and help them realize where the value is in it for them. That can be, the make or break for a lot of them.
I love to hear stories like when I was in FFA and my teacher told me to do this and I didn't want to do that and this and that. And having seen a decade's worth of students do similar things like you mentioned, we find a diamond in the rough and we pinpoint them out, and then they don't want to do it or they're resistant. Sometimes it takes people a little bit longer to drink the Kool-Aid or to buy the latest and greatest of what's going on. And that's one of the reminders to me, is that sometimes we have to meet the student where they're at with regards to getting them involved in some of these FFA, CDE, LDE style activities, because there is an element of you having to be ready for it. And sometimes the ready factor just kind of clicks at a point after what we as teachers have already felt like it's clicked. We're like, hey, come on, hasn't it already clicked with you? Look at you. You're amazing. You're absolutely great. You sound perfect. Oh my gosh. And then it's like, nope, I'll wait until maybe I'm a junior or senior until I realize I am actually good at this, or I can make something of this with myself. So uh, I can honestly say, as an educator to somebody who's pursuing education, or going to be working with future generations, sometimes we just have to take that step back and just wait till that person's ready, or until the group is ready, and then from there it's so beautiful, because then they've bought into it, they've drank the Kool-Aid, and now it's all about taking them from zero to hero with regards to whatever it is, whether it be public speaking or a career development event or a judging team, or heck, if it's just even a lesson in class that they want to learn about a certain topic. We have the best jobs. Ag teachers, we have the best jobs.
Yep, I would agree with you there. And that's not just because I want to become one, but I mean, I probably wouldn't want to become one if I didn't think it was the best job. So I guess that kind of goes hand in hand. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, anyone involved in helping other people develop their lives is in a very, very good position in life, I would say. But I think that kind of wraps up all my talking points. That was everything on my list. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add. I don't want to keep you all day.
No, I do want to say at first, for the viewers out there, Brendan has helped me through my journey as an ag teacher. And one of the things that I can say that echoes everything that we've already talked about is that sometimes your voice is not always the voice that wants to be heard, and other voices are okay to be heard, because sometimes we learn better than just listening to the same voice all the time, which is basically the whole purpose behind a podcast, is to hear those other voices. And so it's been a pleasure having Brennan's voice in, well, not only this case, this podcast, but in my trainings and my teachings with my students, and having the influence of somebody that is not you can be it's a powerful tool. So these podcasts, inviting connections from the ag industry and whatnot, these are moments that will make huge milestones for a lifetime. And having me on here. I hope that this conversation resonates with whoever listens, because I can firmly tell everybody out there that we are headed for something crazy as the population continues to exponentially grow, as diversity continues to only diversify even larger, and the division and all those things. But we can do this. We're one team, folks. We're one team out there. Let's go agriculture. We can do this. That's what I'm going to leave it with. Go ag. We can do this.
I love that. That's a great message. And I think that's very, very inspiring. I'm just going to get a t-shirt that says that now. Go ag. We can do this. But
Yeah.
no, that's great. And I absolutely agree with you. I mean, having different voices, different perspectives is always a huge benefit on any team. It's like you said, it's the reason I have guests on this podcast. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could talk to myself for an hour about anything. It's not very entertaining. I've done it on a couple episodes. It gets a little boring real quick, especially for me, because I don't like hearing my own voice for too long, despite popular belief. But yeah, no, I'm very glad to have you on here and all my other guests on here to share their perspectives and to bring different voices and different ideas to the table. Because I think the conversations and ideas can only grow if you have other, if you have diversity in ideas. It's the only way you can get any kind of progress. But yeah, I think that that wraps up everything I had in mind. So I'm with you on your message. We can do this as long as we stick together. And I think, to take that even a step further for my own message on this podcast, we can only do this if we work together with those who are consuming our product, not against. We need to make sure we're working together as a team, not trying to shut out anyone who has an idea about how agriculture might work. So at the end of the day, I mean, cooperation and communication are two of the most important aspects to use in any kind of situation. Takeaway message for our listeners, as we mentioned earlier, if any of you, or if you know anybody that are interested in agriculture, public speaking, communication, anything like that, or if they have something important they want to say and they don't know how to say it, or if they have, some level of experience in communication, but they don't have a whole lot to talk about, find someone to teach them, or reach out to me, or, find, your local FFA chapter. If they're a high school student, find, your local Toastmasters club or something like that. If you're an adult, just, find a resource to learn how to use those communication skills for good, because they can serve a fantastic purpose. Even if you're not talking about agriculture, they can serve a lot of good. And not only just to spread your message, but again, to boost your confidence and make you feel comfortable talking. And I'm just an old soul, but I would really appreciate it if we would get a little less of the digital conversations and a lot more vocal conversations. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, so I think that kind of wraps up this episode pretty cleanly. Mr. Ferreira, if you wanted, if you have any closing statements, I'm not sure if you're good or.
No, we're good. Yeah, this was fun.
All right. Good. So yeah, thanks again for joining me for this episode. It was a lot of fun. Great conversation. Thanks to all the listeners for tuning in and for supporting me on all these episodes. I will catch all of you next week. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.